Oh, when I first heard about the Peace Camp, I was up in upstate New York, just about 50 miles from the Canadian border. And I was up there living in a tent, helping some people build their house and also being an apprentice carpenter. And it was some people that I knew from Ohio that had moved up there, and there was a guy and his wife and his kids, and I was living on their property in a tent, like I said, and he was a carpenter, so we would go out every week. We'd do 3 or 4 days out fixing houses and then a few days building his house. And that was my living situation, and there was a group of farmers in that area that were kind of back to the land people, and they were all in different stages of that. And some were had been there for 10 years, and some people were just moving up there. So there was all this kind of alternative crowd. And the way that they were able to do this was they took on apprentices like me. And so that's what I was. I was being his apprentice. He was paying me when we did work outside of his house, but mostly I was getting room and board, the room being my tent. And so it was it was just during the summer and stuff like that. And so sometime in July, probably early July, one of the apprentices, there were a lot of women apprentices, okay, and so we they were on different places and everything, but we kind of figured out who we were and stuff because all these people kept interacting too, so the apprentices did. Anyway, this one woman apprentice came up and she said she wanted to have a meeting of the women in some place that was some barn, okay, and so we went up in the loft of the barn, and she told us all about the Peace Camp, and she had been down there for the July 4th things, and there were all these things that happened in July 4th with the flags and everything, and so she was explaining all of this bizarre activity, Women's Peace Camp, and I had never heard of any of this kind of stuff. But previously to this, the way I got up there, I was, I think, 29 or something like that. And the way I had gotten up there was I had a job. I had gotten laid off. I was kind of searching for myself, and I had landed, like I said, up there in upstate New York, living in a tent, and that was just fine with me because I was kind of searching, and I had been on the search for trying to figure out if I was a lesbian, trying to figure out how to work against the anti-nuclear field, because I'd gotten kind of studying that and just kind of outraged. I had just gone across country and seen the Nevada test site, and kind of just on my own was formulating these ideas about it's not okay with me that the government is taking all this land and bombing it, and it's not okay with me that we're putting nuclear power plants around. It's not okay with me. So it was kind of nuclear based, and it was also war stuff based. But I hadn't really organized around all that. I was just, these were all my thoughts as I was running around the country and sitting in my tent contemplating life and stuff. And so when this woman came up and was explaining, there's this Women's Peace Camp, it's just women and da-da-da-da-da, and all these outside this military depot, and it's a sister camp to Greenham Common, and it was just like, what is she talking about? And yeah, I want to go and check it out. And then she said that there was going to be this August 1st action, Hiroshima Day and Nagasaki Day and all this stuff. And so a lot of us that were in that group were like, well, let's go down and check it out. Let's go down for that action in August and stuff like that. And so in the end, a group of 10 of us, 10 women, got together. We made a big banner that said North Country Women Against the Bomb or something like that, or for peace or something like that. It was a tie-dyed circle, and we worked on that banner not knowing exactly what we were doing, but all of us were in different kinds of situations as apprentices, or actually people that had moved up there. Some of the women most of them were, I think all of them were straight. And I was straight, but I kept on thinking I'm a lesbian, but I just don't know what that means enough to say I'm a lesbian. Like, if I haven't had a lesbian relationship, then I might like be overstepping my bounds and stuff. But I wasn't sure, and I had been exploring that concept for a while. One thing, I had decided I was not sleeping with another man, unless forced to, but that was out. And so my other option was sleeping with women, therefore I would be a lesbian, but I wasn't sure if I was a lesbian. And so if it wasn't going to be sleeping with lesbians or women, and it wasn't going to be sleeping with men, I would be celibate, and that would just be fine with me. It was just, I did not want to be entangled in things that I did not like. And so I had been somewhat secretly exploring that side of myself. And so I think this, so like I said, all these other women were straight, but they were alternative, but they were straight. They're like hippie women stuff. But I never really talked to them about it, about that part. And I had, like I said, cross country and visited people that I knew from different places. And when I had mentioned that I was like looking into that aspect, it always ended up in disaster, and it just didn't work. I could go on and on about how it didn't work, but it was just kind of like, I just said, I'll just explore this to myself and keep my, I won't ask anyone for advice. It's a bad idea to ask straight women for advice about that stuff. And so, so it appealed to me to go down to a place that was all women, that was anti-nuclear, that was outside of military base. You know, when I was passing by the nuclear test site in Nevada, these thoughts of, like, oh, I could just drive my car right into that fence, you know, I could just, I could just do this, I could just run, and I thought, if I would do that, but you know what, they'd probably arrest me and stick me in some jail cell, and no one would know where I am, because nobody knows where I am, and I didn't tell anybody, and I kind of set it up that way. I didn't want people to, you know, I wanted to be free and footloose, and I didn't want to be like, oh, I said I would be there and I wasn't there, or something like that. So many times when I'd be crossing the country and there would be a military base or some kind of something related to, and not nuclear power plants so much, so I had done that a little earlier, and that's kind of how I got interested in the war stuff. But I would have this enormous rage, and like, I want to do something like slam into this group of people, you know, and they can pick up the pieces and sort it out later. It'll just make me feel really good about now, you know. And so I realized I had this rage inside of me that was just really, could get me in trouble if I acted on any of that impulse stuff. And I probably wouldn't act on any of that impulse stuff, but I actually had to say to myself as I was driving out, no, Woody, don't do that. That's not a good idea. It's just really not a good idea. Just keep driving, you know. And so I knew that there was some bubbling up and boiling up stuff. So when I heard about it, and someone was explaining it, I said, yeah, I definitely want to go, and I decided I'd go for 10 days. Everybody else was going for the weekend, like 3 days, maybe 4 days, maybe 5 days. But me, I was like, I want to stay for the whole week, and then I'll, you know, calm down a little bit, and then come back, and I'll drive myself, if, you know, rather than caravan, or I'll drive my car and bring people down, but I'm not going back up with everybody, so they have to find that rides back up. And I had to unpack my tent, which, like I said, was my house. It had all my books and everything in it, and kind of put it away for 10 days and then take the tent up there. And so I did that, and we went up there, and just to tell you, I got to the camp, and there were people in my car and everything, and we pulled in the driveway, and I like just put my foot on the ground actually, and just kind of leaned out, and I saw all of these women, all this activity. It was you know, build up for the August 1st action. There's workshops going on under these big tents. There are women carrying big logs around, and there was all these things happening. And I looked out, and I just like this, and I said, I'm home. And I'm a lesbian. These are lesbian. Okay, now I get it. I am. Okay. I can't say it to anyone yet because I haven't had a lesbian relationship, but I am, and I'm here. I'm home. So it was that feeling from the time I put my foot on that land. It was like I'm here. I need to be here, and that was. And I was there for 10 days, and in that 10 days, I just. Walked around, and I got arrested. I did everything anyone wanted me to do. It was fine. Nothing, the women that I came with, I hung out with them too, but they were all straight. And so I would kind of just walk away from them a little bit and kind of hang out with a group of lesbians on the side and just listen to their conversation because I didn't even know them or anything. But, I just remember some things like that I was just like exploring and knowing I needed to figure it out, but I wasn't quite sure. And all these women from the North Country were there, and I hadn't talked to them at all about being a lesbian, so I didn't want to just go, hey, I'm a lesbian, And they'd like, Woody, you're a little flaky. So that's kind of where I was at, and that's.
So you stayed for 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of that 10 days, did you know you were going to come back to the peace camp, or that was it? You had the experience.
Well, they were saying they were closing the camp on Labor Day weekend, and so I believed that. And so I didn't know if I'd be coming back. I think I can't remember, but I think I came back for the Labor Day closing ceremony, and I was on my way back to Cleveland. And so, I just made sure I got there for that ceremony. Maybe stayed overnight and moved on. But when I left, I heard some rumblings of like women were like, a lot of people didn't want to close the camp or whatever, but I just figured, well, may or may not be there next year, but I was moving on. I had to go back, and so yeah, at the end of 10 days, it was like it was just such a fulfilling experience in that 10 days. And I did get arrested. We were in my affinity group with the 10 women up there, and we did our thing, but I still didn't have any like lesbian relationship or sexual contact or anything, so I wasn't aware. I was just very leery about saying I was a lesbian because here I was in a large camp full of lesbians, and if I did it wrong, I might be, ousted. Didn't want that. And so I just kept it to myself. And, people would be sitting around. I got into some little campfire areas, and all the lesbians are going, well, let's all tell our coming out stories, and I'm like, I don't have one. And so I would just like, I don't want to talk about it or something, I don't have anything to talk about.
Give me a couple hours.
Yeah, right. And so I was just very tentative and hesitant about all that stuff. I was I felt inside that's where I was, but I didn't even ever say I was a lesbian until like the next summer, and I'd been hooked up with somebody, and then,
So what happened the next summer that you heard about it again, or that you knew that it was still going on?
So what happened was I, that year, traveled to Mexico for 6 months. Again, still looking for mission in life and whatever. And so I was in Mexico from November to May, and then in May I stopped off in Cleveland for a while, like just trying to catch up with everything. I had a house there, and it was a duplex, and I lived on the 3rd floor, and I'd been gone for 6 months, and the person who was taking care of it, neglected to pay the water bill. Things like that, which I was like trying to really make sure things like that stayed happening, and she just didn't. But anyway, So I had to kind of fix things up again. And then once I did that, I contacted the person, the carpenter, again. And I had, before I left, asked him if I could come back the next summer, and he said yes. And I liked doing that. I liked living in the tent. It was great. I liked all the people up there. So I said, well, I'm going to come up this weekend. So I went up that weekend, and it was probably at the end of May or something, beginning of June, something like that. I couldn't get up there too early because it was cold and I was living in my tent. So I had to kind of come depending on the weather. And so I told him I was coming up there a certain weekend, and then started driving up there. And then on the way up there, I said, well, I'm going to go down to the camp and see if the camp is still there, because I don't know. When I left, they weren't clear. And if they are there, I want to see what kind of programs or activities they have, because I'll set some time up to go down there during the summer. So where the camp is and where I was apprenticing was about a 3.5-hour drive at least. So I still had quite a drive to go to get up there that night. And it's this land where there's no electricity and there's no running water and stuff like that. And I'm coming with my tent. I kind of didn't want to be there in the middle of the night. I'm sure I could have just slept on their farm, but they're going to be asleep. I just kind of wanted to be up there. So I didn't have a lot of time. It was probably, getting towards late afternoon, maybe 4 or 5, something like that. And I said, well, I'm going to go get down to the camp, find out what the program is, get back on the road and get up there to the thing. So I did that. I went down to the camp, and there was like one person, and I'm not sure, but I think it might have been Luna, that was outside not going to the meeting, but everybody else was in a meeting. And so I went down and I said, I'm just looking to see if, the camp is open, if you're having programs, you have a little calendar of events or something like that. And it was like, she didn't know anything. And she said, well, they're all in a meeting. And I said, oh, I don't have a lot of time. I was wondering if, is there someone that, how do I find out this information if I can't do it right now? And she's like, I don't know. So it was like, she said, the best thing is for you to wait for the meeting to be over and then talk to some of the people there, because, they might be talking about some of this stuff there. And so I was like, okay, how long is the meeting going to be? And she was like, I don't know. She didn't know anything, but I think it was Luna. And she was like, kind of a funny kind of woman that I hadn't kind of met before. She's like, hi, my name's Luna, and she was just kind of slow talking, and it was just funny because it was like, I don't know who this person is, and she doesn't know anything, and I'm on my trip, and it was just not really conducive, but she did convince me to stay for the meeting to be over, which it was like an hour long wait eventually. But anyway, eventually everybody came out, and Luna said, you can stay for dinner and everything. And I said, well, I'm trying to get up to this place before dark. I have 4 hours, and but the more I was there hanging out just on the front porch kind of waiting around, the more it was like, I might as well stay for dinner because I'm hungry and whatever. I thought dinner would have been made already, but it wasn't even started. People in the meeting were in the meeting. And so dinner didn't happen till like 8. And but in that time, women came out, and they were all, how women at the Peace Camp are, they're all like, oh, a new person came, and they're all trying to find out what I'm doing and explaining the camp and everything. And so we were kind of hanging out there, and so they asked me what I was doing. And I said, well, I'm going up north to this land, and I'm an apprentice carpenter and everything. And as I was explaining all this, they all stopped talking. They were all looking at me, and they said, well, in our meeting, we asked the goddess to send us 3 carpenters, so you're here. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. I'm an apprentice carpenter, and I don't really know what I'm doing, but I do supposed to be up there, you know. And they're like, well, the reason we need carpenters is because we're trying to build 3 outhouses, and the footers are being built. They're only halfway constructed. And the cement truck is coming at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock on Monday morning. And this is like Friday afternoon, 8 o'clock. And I had been making footers up at the North Country, and I knew how you had to make them pretty sturdy, and that it was a project. As a matter of fact, the whole last year, that's all we did on the guy's house is the footers, and we didn't even finish. And so they're saying 3 outhouses on this 52-acre farm, and they're like in different stages of being built, and the truck is coming at 6. I said, well, I don't think that you can pour the cement if the footers aren't made. That's my experience, at least I know that much. And I don't think you can get them done like that quickly, but I don't know. I'm not a carpenter. I'm just an apprentice carpenter. And they're like, I don't know, you know, of course my memory might be wrong on this, but, you know, it seemed like they were very invested in me staying there. And so, like, they encouraged me to eat and hang out. And then they said, well, you can just stay overnight here and stuff like that if you want, rather than go up in the dark to this. And at that time, that made sense, so I did that. And, you know, actually, I was kind of enjoying hanging out with them. I just had my other agenda that was bothering me. And so I ended up staying there all weekend and making those footers, and 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning, that cement truck was hauling in there, and it was like this huge cement truck, and I was like, Aaron, you know Aaron, do you remember Aaron? Young dyke, alternative long skirts, you know, and she's like, you know, hippie, young hippie, you know. She's the only one, she was like, I'll help you, Woody, you know, and I said, okay, well, let's go to that one first, you know, and I'm going, get that board up there, and she's like in this long skirt, you know. Aaron is just like, okay, you know, and I'm like frantically trying to get this thing, and I can see the cement truck coming by, you know, and so, I mean, I throw in one last nail and I go, okay, you know, and then I'm like, I don't even wait for him. I just run over to the middle of that field for that second, and I go, come on, Aaron, we got to go, you know, and she's like, okay, do we need this? You know, and I'm like, bring everything, just get over here, you know. We run over there, and I'm like, trying to, you know, it's like, I worked all day Saturday, I worked all day Sunday, but disaster could be right around the corner very easily, and there were another 2 carpenters that showed up either. And some of the women that had helped me over the weekend, which everybody, you know, did, but they were like, didn't stick around, you know, like they'd start working and everything, and then they'd say, oh, well, I gotta go meet with my girlfriend, you know, or something like that, or I have to go make dinner. And so I'd be like, well, you're in the middle of, you know, and then I'd have to find somebody else to hold up the board so I could nail it or something, you know. I'm just, it wasn't the best working situation. And so the cement truck comes and starts pouring, and I'm like, the third one is the accessibility one all the way up at the house, you know, and we're at the middle of the field in the back. So I'm like, Aaron, come on, we got to get up there, you know, to the other one, you know. And, you know, the cement truck guy could see that we were not the best situation, and so he was like, when he'd get through, he'd go really slow over to the next site, you know, because he had his schedule too, but he was like trying to give us as much time as he could. So we had to go up to the third one, which was the accessibility one, which was the hardest one because it needed a concrete pad as opposed to a footer, which is like a wall. It was pouring a pad, and it had to be contained. It was a lot more cement that had to be contained than in the other ones, and it was the one that was least finished. And so I didn't know how this thing was going to go, but Aaron and I like ran up there, and you know, Aaron's kind of getting worn out at this point, and I would have been too if it wasn't for the adrenaline. but I was definitely on an adrenaline rush. And so, here I'm working as hard as I can, and I see the cement truck coming up the field, and I'm like, okay, well, it just has to go or not, because according to the women, they bought the cement, and it had to be poured. Like, they couldn't just say, come back another day, because they've already mixed it up, and that's their load, and they've already paid for it. And if they said, we can't use it, cancel it, they would probably take it back someplace and dump it someplace over there, but then we'd have to pay for another whole load, and of course the finances were always this way. And of course, when I asked them, who ordered the cement, and why did they order it for Monday morning at 7 o'clock? I mean, without the things being built yet. And they said, well, somebody was in charge of that, and they did that, and they couldn't cancel it. So that's how I got stuck in that predicament. But anyway, the thing came up, and they poured that cement, and the whole thing collapsed. And I was like, well, sorry. But yeah, the forms didn't hold up on that thing, and we had to really just live with what was happening. Because once that cement got poured, it was, too late. You couldn't fix it. You just had to adapt it. I mean, it worked all those years, but it wasn't good. I knew that. I knew how not good it was. Nobody else, I think, knew the significance of it, but I did. So anyway, that's how I got there. And they let me go on Monday. I knew that, that weekend was a good thing for me, because basically what they convinced me of was that I was needed as a carpenter. Those skills were needed. Merry Christmas was the other person who was in charge of logistics, and after that weekend, the women were like, can't you come down and work for us, And I said, well, I'm kind of committed up there. I wanted to do both, but I don't know how to do that right now. So when I went up there, I explained to the people I was with that I wanted to be back there, going back and forth a little bit. And so that's what I ended up doing. A lot of times I would just go down there and come back. It was a little bit of a thing, like I wouldn't just go for a weekend down there, because I had to take my whole tent down, and that was my living quarters up there, and so I would go down like for a week at a time or something like that. It was, or maybe I just had to kind of all summer figure it out, and according to some of the actions, if I wanted to be in the actions and stuff like that. So I got back there, and they offered me a stipend of $25 a week, and I was logistics coordinator with Merry Christmas, and I think I got $25 one time, maybe twice, and Andrea got pissed off about it anyway, because I got a stipend at some point of $25, and then she needed a ride to Rochester, and she wanted me to take her, and I said no, because I was doing other things, and she kept on getting on my case about it. And then I said, okay, finally. And then I said, well, can you give me gas money? And she said, well, you got a stipend, you should pay for it, because, And I'm like, I don't think I should have to spend my stipend on taking you to Rochester, Anyway, we got into a whole thing about that, but that was kind of a typical attitude a lot of times around that. People would get mad at me because I got a stipend. I mean, I got a stipend maybe once. I know I got one once. One $25 thing for a week of work. And it was late. It wasn't like the first week. It was like 4 weeks later, I got a stipend. And then maybe I got another one. But, I was head of logistics, and that first summer we were changing things from temporary structures to permanent structures. Right. And so that's why we were building outhouses rather than just having a porta-john, I mean, the decisions had been made to make it a permanent camp rather than a temporary summer camp. And so logistics ended up being making the structures so that would work, putting plumbing out to that campground. A major thing which I had no experience in, but that was like that's your job. And it's like, I see. Okay, building up women's. Plus, there were events going on, and logistics had to be involved with that too. The Women's Herstory Museum was one of those things. Like I said, I was at a meeting. I never really went to the regional meetings, and Andrea would get on my case about that too, because she'd say everybody has to participate in these meetings, and it's like, well, why don't you just tell me what happens at the meeting? I don't really have any input on it, and I'm rather do some work or whatever while I'm here. And so one time I went to that meeting, and then they got mad at me because I hadn't started on the Women's Herstory Museum yet. And they said, you haven't even talked to anybody about the Women's Herstory Museum. And I said, well, I know what I'm going to do. You've told me what you need, and you just need some walls with mounting banners and, you know, other stuff, and so I'll just make it like a hallway. And I had even measured how it was going to be 10 feet wide by 80 feet long. I had it all in my head. A pillar every 8 feet, I think, or 4 feet or something. Mm-hmm. I had it all. I knew what the wood was I knew everything about it. I just hadn't told anyone. But I had it in my all taken care of, and they were like, well, they were worried that it wasn't going to get done. So I was like, okay, we'll just cancel all that other stuff, and we'll just go out there and start it now. And they're like, good. Like, it's bad for me, but okay, you know. So, you know, that's when we started the Women's Herstory Museum, which was going to be like for the Hiroshima days, and they only wanted it for a weekend, so I built it for a weekend. And like most things that happened there at that camp, they'd say, we only want it for a weekend, and then it's so nice, we don't want to take it down, you know. And so then it's like up there for a year, and it's falling down because I only built it for a weekend. I didn't build it for a permanent structure, you know. I would have done little things differently if I had known it was going to be there for a year. And so it was aggravating that way, working with logistics. I'm getting all my griping out. Oh, I didn't realize I had all this stuff all piled up. I had a great summer, except for these kinds of things. You know, I might be complaining a lot, but at the same time, what I was getting, I was so happy to be involved with all these women. Everybody was a big, strong dyke, you know, and taking on the military. I mean, this was just what I wanted to do. So I was totally devoted to the camp and totally devoted to any of the women. It didn't matter if they gave me a hard time. I would just argue with them my back, but I was enthralled with everybody and everything at the same time.
How did you go from being Patty Bloom to...
Oh, to bring that up. Previous to this, I had kind of been... I'd brushed up against feminism in pretty strong ways in the past. But at the camp, it was more like so many women there were having a political analysis that was written down. They were articulate. They knew what they were talking about. And I wasn't articulate. I hadn't done a lot of the reading. I mean, I read the peace camp information. I saw the books in the libraries, Barbara Deming stuff and whatever, but I never really had time to sit. I mean, sometimes I'd sit and I'd read an essay or something, but I was really getting a strong understanding of the patriarchy, and I had brushed up against it in several places in my life previous to that. As a matter of fact, that's one reason why I went into engineering, because there weren't any women in engineering, and I'm set for life, you know. The women's liberation movement will just make sure I always have a job, and stuff like that. But I hadn't ever really studied feminism, okay, but and like when I was in engineering, I was the only woman in that area, and I had to keep on kind of battling, keeping my ground and standing my ground, I should say, in lots of ways. So I mean, there was a lot of stuff I had around that, but as far as theory, etc., I was learning 101 in lots of respects at the peace camp. And I don't think I ever, I mean, I probably had heard the word patriarchy before, but never really went in my mind at all about what that was and what that meant. And at the camp, patriarchy, that word was used a lot, and it was on banners, and it was everywhere. So, my name was Patricia. And when I had looked up the meaning of my name, you know, back when I was 10 and had a book, it said female patriarch. And I was like, not that I knew what that meant, but it stuck in my head. It stuck in my head. And I was named Patricia because I was born on St. Patrick's Day. And I never liked that because I wasn't Irish, and people would give me green potatoes and make me eat green cake. They would give me leprechauns. They would kiss me on Irish buttons. When I became 18, I had to go and get drunk. I couldn't go do anything. I had to do what St. Patrick's Day people wanted me to do, because they just, in Cleveland, they just took over the town, and I never liked it. And so when I was at the camp, I started thinking about that, and I was like, I knew a little bit about St. Patrick, and he had driven the snakes out of Ireland, and somebody told me snakes was a symbol for pagans, and so I started kind of putting those things together. And of course, women's feminist spirituality was also very strong at the camp. I had never been involved in anything like that, but I'd go along with the program no matter what was going on and just embrace it and not worry about it too much. But that whole thing with my name, it started bothering me because I understood after a while that the patriarchy was what I kept beating my head up against. And I didn't want to be a female patriarch. And then somebody said, well, that would be a matriarch, wouldn't it? And I'd say, yeah, but then my name would be Matricia, you know? And, you know, and there aren't any Matricias in the world that I know of. And so that didn't, like, and then, you know, if there was a Matricia, then that would mean there'd be a matric for the male, and that would be a male matrician. And, you know, I mean, it's just kind of like nothing was, my name did not make sense. A female patrician doesn't make sense. And so I said, okay, let me just get rid of it. You know, I don't need it. And there were lots of people who were named like Leaf, you know, or Flower Bud or whatever, you know. And I was like, I don't want a name like that. I don't want like a nature name. That's fine if that's what they want, but I want a name that people would take me seriously on, because all my life in the engineering field, people wouldn't take me seriously. Oh, you're a woman. Oh, well, okay, we'll find a man to do this, you know. And it's like, no, just take me seriously. So I wanted a name that was a bit androgynous, but a real name, but something I could also resonate with. Like a name like Sandy would have been fine, but I wasn't resonating with Sandy, you know, and stuff like that. And so what ended up happening, and the way I got my name, was, do you remember Moon? Well, Moon happened to be making a cup of tea in the kitchen, and I was talking to somebody in the kitchen, and I had decided I was going to change my name. I didn't know what to do, what name to change it to, and I was looking for a name. And I was explaining this to somebody, and they said, well, you know, what do you resonate with or something? And I said, well, you know, I'm a carpenter. I like, you know, working in the woods and stuff like that. I'm a carpenter and everything. And I kind of explained some of those things, and I wanted like an androgynous name and whatever, serious name. And so Moon finished making her tea over there, and then she was leaving the kitchen to go into the pit. And as she passed by, she said, something like Woody, huh? And then she just kept walking. She didn't stop and ask me if that was okay or anything. But she said it, and it just like, it was it. It was like exactly like Woody, you know? And so I said, that's a really good name. So I took that name, and then my last name was Bluebaugh, and that was another problem because Bluebaugh all my life. People would go, oh, blue balls? Oh, blue balls? And they make this little joke about blue balls. And it was like, you know, it's not blue balls. And I don't really want to be associated with blue balls. I'm not even like into men or anything, and it just was like something that was always and nobody knew how to spell it. I'd try spelling it, and then they'd have to scratch it out and respell it, and scratch it out and respell it. It was just a confusing spelling. So I said, you know, I can make it real easy, just chop off that ba part and make it blue, and I don't have to think about it, you know, and everybody knows how to spell blue, and they don't have to go into that. So I just said, I'll just make it blue. And I didn't, you know, and then Woody Blue, okay. That sounds better than Patricia Bluebaugh, you know, for me, and so I just kept it. Over the years, people go, wow, what a great name, it's so musical and everything. I said, well, I never planned it to be like words that fit together or anything. And a funny thing about the name, that weekend, I said, okay, I'm just going to experiment and call myself Woody Blue. Whenever anyone new comes to the camp, I'll introduce myself as Woody Blue. I'll tell people, try to call me Woody Blue so I can see what that feels like. And that weekend, I think, was like a weekend where everybody went up to Michigan, and so there wasn't hardly anybody at the camp. And so everybody left, and then some new women came for the weekend. And so I said, hi, my name's Woody Blue, you know, and they go, oh, okay, nice to meet you, Woody Blue, blah, blah, blah. And then all weekend they'd go, Woody, Woody, and I wasn't used to that name, so I wouldn't turn around. They'd be calling me. And like there were only like 3 women at the camp, and so it'd be like, we're calling her and she's ignoring us, you know, she's walking away, you know, Woody, Woody, you know. And it was like, oh, you want me? By the end of the weekend, I finally got it. But and the other thing, a funny thing about the name was that later on, or maybe the next year or something, some women came to the camp from California, and they pulled into the driveway, and I was greeting people, and so I went over and I said, hello, you know, nice to see you, and welcome to the Peace Camp, and my name is Woody Blue, and said a few things, and they kind of looked at each other, and they looked at me, and they thought I was joking. And I said, no. They said, is that your real name, Woody Blue? And I said, yeah, it's my real name. Call me Woody Blue. That's the and everything. And so they kind of didn't say anything, but they kind of didn't believe me. And it was a little irritating. And I, like later that day or at dinner or something, they saw other people were calling me Woody Blue, so they believed me then. And then they came up and they said that they kind of apologized, and they said, we have parakeets at our house, and one of them's named Woody and one of them's named Blue. And so we thought somebody had told you that, and you know, you were trying to play a joke on us. No, I didn't know anything about your parakeets. It was very significant because after I changed my name, I did not want to be, I never changed my name legally, but I did not want to be addressed as Patricia, because I did have that analysis of I don't want to be the patriarchy. I was trying to get away from the patriarchy or destroy the patriarchy or whatever, and so I left that behind. I didn't change my name legally because I just figured, well, when I'm dealing with the patriarchy, they can have my patriarchal name because it's not me they're dealing with. They're just dealing with a patriarchal cardboard figure or something. But that's what they want, and so they can do that. But my real name, I always told people my real name is Woody Blue. But it's not the name I was born with.
You said that there was something, you mentioned ritual at the camp. Was that the first time you were around stuff like that? And can you tell us about your journey with that in the encampment?
Yeah, that was about, I've never been really drawn to institutionalized religions or anything like that. And probably the first time at the Peace Camp, I don't remember if there were other circles I was ever involved in. I don't really think I was too much in any pagan circle or anything. I might have heard about them, but I never really participated. Probably the first summer I was there before the there were things happening ritual-wise, and I probably went in and out of those circles a little bit because it was the Hiroshima actions and stuff like that. And so women would gather and honor the memories and things like that. The second year I was there more, and part of the camp, and so they would have these circles out in the woods, and the first couple circles, it was just out in the middle of the clearing in between those two campgrounds in that circle, that campground area. And it was irritating to me because it was all messed up back there, and there was all these branches, and people were just always stepping around stuff. And so one of the things I did as logistics person, I started cleaning up that area, and I assigned a few people. I was one of these, they called the clipboard ladies. Do you remember that term?
Absolutely.
Yes. People, oh, the clipboard ladies are saying this. The clipboard ladies get a stipend. Or the clipboard, it's like, clipboard lady abuse was happening big time on my side of it. But anyway, so I would always have a list of jobs, and then when people came to the camp, because I was involved in logistics and getting things set up, there was a lot of stuff like that. And so had assigned some people to go and clean up the campground or campfire area.
What became the Witch's Circle.
Right, the Witch's Circle area, right. And because it irritated me that they were doing these things and people couldn't get back in there. There wasn't any good path or anything like that. So some women, of course, who were into making a great space, they went back there and they cleared out paths and they made it all beautiful, I was just trying to get the debris away. Anyway, so once that happened, I could go to those circles and feel a little bit better about, instead of like looking around at the stuff, I could kind of participate in a different way. I don't know, I don't think I would ever call myself a Wiccan or anything, but I was introduced to those concepts and the directions and calling in this spirit world, and all of that I was open to hearing all that. And then Lindsay came to the camp, and Lindsay brought firewalking, and she was a total pagan things. Well, before that, I got involved with TC, Thundercloud, and she was a witch. And of course the relationship didn't last for very long. We're two very different kinds of people, but she was always like, she'd always refer to me, she'd go, "Oh, you're such a baby dyke," when I'd ask her a question or something. "Oh, you're such a baby dyke," But she was always hanging out with the witches and stuff like that. And I was always doing the practical stuff, like building, getting piping down to that camping area and stuff like that. So she kind of introduced me to witches and stuff and what that meant. And then Twilight was in charge of all the herbs and stuff, the herb room, remember that? All the jars. And she was taking on, her and a couple other people, Victoria, they were all into these herbs, which most herbs I'd ever had was Lipton tea, that was a whole different world. I never understood. I was very intimidated by the massage room and the herbs. Like they'd say, "Do you need some calming teas?" And it was like, or "What herbs do you want?" And it was like, "No, I don't want anything. Glass of water, please." It was just intimidating to me. I didn't understand healing women or herbal anything, and it was a whole. And so the Wiccan spirituality stuff was like that for me too. It was like, I'm still learning about patriarchy. I'm still, okay, now I'll call myself a lesbian, but it took me a long time to get there, and I just constantly felt a little bit out of my element, but really needing to be there and tread softly because I wasn't sure what I was doing. And so women's spirituality stuff, I could get behind clearing out that witch's circle and making it neat, but actually participating in it and calling in the spirits, it was like, okay, whatever. When Lindsay came, that's kind of when things changed for me with that, because she was so, I think, first of all, she's a very strong personality, but she was so dramatically showed me how living outside a patriarchal structure, believing what you believe, wholeheartedly calling in the spirits as if, you know, they were going to walk down the boardwalk and shake your hand, that real. And she had rituals that were like, you know, turn 3 times here and create a vortex, turn 3 times there, create a vortex, set yourself into the power circle. And, you know, she had all these like formulas that she would just do as if, you know, she was making a cake, and at the end she'd have her thing. And I saw like how she embodied that, and then I could get behind it, because it wasn't just kind of like some stuff floating around the air that some people knew a lot about and some people didn't, and it made more sense to me. It made more concrete sense. So then I did a fire walk, and that was an all-day fire walk, and I had studied physics. I knew about the laws of nature. And when you do fire walking, you walk on hot coals. And, you know, she had this whole thing about getting over fears. Well, up in my other job with the carpentry stuff, I had that summer, earlier that summer, was it that summer or the summer before? Anyway, it was cold. It was like frosty mornings, so I might have gotten up there early. But we had been working on a roof. We had been working on a addition to a house up there, and they had a deck, and we had to do something on the roof. Anyway, we got there early in the morning, and there was a crew of us. There was like 4 or 5 of us, and the guy that I was apprenticed to said he'd go up on the roof and be the first person up on the roof, check it out or something. So he went up. He told me, stay at the bottom of the ladder. So I said, okay, I'll stay at the bottom of the ladder. So he went up there and he goes, okay, it's all okay up here. And so I just started climbing up the ladder without somebody holding onto the ladder at the bottom. And it was a frosty deck, and I got to the top of the roof, and the ladder fell out, slid out, and I went down with it, and it was like 12 foot or something like that, and I caught my leg in between the rung and the deck. I landed anyway, like there was this indentation on my leg that was a rung, and then I landed right on my back, and it was extremely painful. I didn't break anything or whatever, but I couldn't work the rest of the day, and it wasn't like take her to the hospital for x-rays. It was like, you can sit in here, you know, if you feel okay. I mean, first they were like, don't move her, and I was like, I can get up. I can get up. And so they let me, once I could walk around, they said, okay, you're probably okay, but you don't have to work, just lay in the house for the day, or if you feel like you can work later, come on out, but you're excused. And they were all like, you know, oh my gosh, why did you climb up that ladder without somebody holding on to, you know, the bottom? And I was like, well, because the guy that I'm apprenticed to was up there, and he said it was okay. And I kind of felt embarrassed about it, because I should have known better, and I didn't know better, and all that stuff. But the crew the person I was apprenticed to is fine with it all, but the other people were a little bit like put off, because they lost a worker, you know, a little bit, and they were trying to do this job, and now all this stuff was going on. And so I felt a little bit, you know, not good about that. And then my leg just didn't get better right away. I'd really severely dented my leg. I mean, you could put your hand in there, and it hurt a lot. And so I just very slowly got back to that. But over the summer, my leg got better, so I wasn't limping and stuff like that. But I was afraid to go back up on the ladder. I was terrified to go up on a ladder. And a lot of the work that the carpenter up there and me were doing was like we'd have to do a roofing job or something like that, or we had to fix something on the chimney or something, and we had to go up on roofs. And so when we would do that, and I don't recall if we did that with other crews. Usually it was just him and me working together. This other job was just a temporary thing. But what happened was we'd go, he'd set up the ladders and everything, and I was like supposed to bring up the roofing tile up the ladder and stuff, and that meant like heaving it on your shoulder and then climbing up this ladder. And so I would do that, but it would take me forever to get up the ladder. Before that accident, it wasn't a problem, and nothing really deterred me. As a matter of fact, we were working on a 3-story house or something at one point before that accident, and I was nailing tiles up, and I had tennis shoes on, and I started sliding down the roof, and I was like, oh, I'm sliding, you know, and he reached out and he grabbed my shirt or something until I could get my feet steady. But I was at the edge of the roof by that time he did that, and I was laughing. You know, I wasn't afraid. I just figured it would work out or something. But he was like, you don't really want to go over the roof, you know, and I'm like, yeah, you're right about that, you know. But I mean, it was very casual. I felt casual on the roof before that. After that fall, it was like horrible. I'd go up there on the roof, and the guy would say, oh, his name was Mike. Mike would go, oh, I forgot my hammer. I just better go back down there and get it. And then he'd go down and get his hammer and then get 2 things of tiles up on his way back up to help me out, you know. So he was very helpful, and he understood why I was afraid, but he wasn't. I had to do my job, but it was really hard. And then I'd get up on the roof, and he'd go, I'll tell you what, I'll do all the edges, and you do the middle of the roof, you know. And so, you know, and if I had to go near the edge, it'd be like hammering, you know, very inefficiently. And so that's how I was. And we were in the middle of a roofing job when I went down to the Peace Camp for a weekend to do a fire walk. And that was the first fire walk I went to. And Lindsay said it's all about fears, trying to overcome fears and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to put out this fear that I have of like heights at this point. And it's a pretty strong fear. And we went through that whole day. And at the end of the day, I walked on those coals. And I knew I didn't have to walk on the coals to address the fears, but I decided I wanted to. I had 2 little burn spots on my foot after that, but not anything that I couldn't rationalize why my feet didn't burn. I didn't understand that. But I didn't feel any different after that fire walk. And then I went back up on Monday morning. We had to go back to that roofing job. And so Mike went up on the roof, and, you know, with a thing of tiles, and he said, okay, we have to get these tiles up here. And I just grabbed one of those tile things, and I ran up on the roof, and I put it down and started going back down the roof. And Mike's looking at me, and he goes, oh, something's changed, or something like that. And I said, what? And I said, and I was like halfway down, and I go, oh, what, did I do something wrong, you know, or something? And he goes, no, you don't seem to have a problem going up and down on the roof.
The ladder.
The ladder. And I said, oh, yeah, I took care of that. And I didn't really want to say I did a fire walk because, again, these people were straight and whatever. I didn't really want to. Feminist spirituality was weird enough for me. I didn't really need to introduce it to him. But I just said, yeah, I did some stuff over the weekend, and I'm fine. How many more tile things do you want, you know? And he was like, I'm like, 5. I said, okay, fine. And I, you know, all day, I'd go over all the way to the edge, just the way it was before. And I wasn't aware that that change had taken place until Mike mentioned it. And after he mentioned it, I said, I can't believe that I'm not afraid, because I'm not afraid of this, and I feel fine and I feel confident, and I don't feel like I'm going to fall. I know what I'm doing, and I'm, stable. And so that gave me the information that all these things that Lindsay was doing were true. Like, she could make things happen. She could it wasn't her making it, but it was like you could walk on fire and not get burned, no matter how hot. You could do all these things. You could change fear into not fear. You could do anything you wanted to. And now the sky's the limit for me. And because it's like there's a lot of things I want to do, which I could never do because of physical things getting in the way. And so it wasn't like I really embraced the Wiccan way of calling in directions or all these things, but it was like that world is open to me, and Lindsay seemed to have these little recipe things, and so Lindsay for me was and Lindsay had this large tumor on her neck too that would go up and down, and she told me she had just come from the Raw Food Institute up there in New England someplace, and so she was introducing us to all the wheatgrass, and she had her little plot of land that she'd grow her food on and stuff, and I was kind of fascinated with that too, but she told me when she went up to the raw food place that she her tumor was so big that she couldn't bend her head down, that her head was going back a lot because it was so big, and that she was losing her voice because it was pressing against her vocal cords, and she was speaking hoarsely, and like she also told me that the people over in the Oakland health clinic were very uncomfortable with her because she wouldn't get it cut out because it was getting so big, and they were afraid it was going to suffocate her. She told me a lot about this stuff, and that she refused to get it cut out because it was by her throat chakra, and that was more important to her to preserve her throat chakra than and I was like, again, throat chakra, what is that about? It's like you're losing your voice, you can't put your head down, and you're drinking herbs and eating raw food, and you're doing ritual around this life-threatening tumor. Again, I watched her all summer. I was totally like entranced with how she was dealing with this, and her tumor went down throughout the summer. She started singing a lot. She'd go in the woods and sing, and she'd have all these pagan songs she was singing about bringing the spirits to her and stuff like that. And I'd go out and listen to her sometimes, and you know how she is. She's just like, I'd go, "Oh, I heard you sing." "Yeah, girlfriend, I'm singing the song. The spirits are all around, And I'm like, "Oh." And she would just be so casual about the spirituality aspect of it in ways that other women weren't casual about it. It was like the ritual was a special event, but with her, these just spiritual beings are around all the time, and she would like do things like she'd pour a little water on the ground for the spirits and then have some water, and I'd go, "What are you doing?" And she'd go, "Well, just honoring the ancestors," or she'd say something like that, and it was kind of mumbo jumbo to me, but she made feminist spirituality a reality for me. You can get over your fear, you can reduce your tumor, you can do all of these things are out there at our disposal. The only thing that's stopping you is your patriarchal ideas of the way physics work. That's what's holding you back. That's your problem. It's like, yeah, but 500 years ago they discovered gravity and things don't float, and she's like, they don't float because you don't think they're going to float, and it's like, I don't know, okay. So later on, whether it was 85 or 86, I did a lot of work at the Peace Camp, and I used that knowledge a lot. Again, not quite the way other people would, but like I did sit outside the airport, the airfield, and monitor the planes and stuff coming in. And that always made those guards nervous. And they would come and try to get rid of us. And, I'd be monitoring what plane would come in and what time. And one time, we were outside on someone's property, but they had that, 8 feet of clearance or something like that. And we were sitting out there around the airfield, but we were on someone's property, and I was with somebody. Maybe I was with 2 people, I can't remember. But we were sitting right at the edge of that grass land, and I was making notes and everything, and the police, my car was parked over there on the street, and I could see the police came, and then some military vehicles came, and they were all parked around my car and getting out of their cars and stuff. And I said, let's make ourselves invisible, because that was one thing I was working on, trying to be invisible. And I didn't know if, how do you know when you're invisible? You kind of don't. I mean, unless you come to a mirror, maybe. Anyway, I said, let's make ourselves invisible. It's just all, like, however we're going to do it. Say we're invisible. And then instead of sitting there, we just laid down on the grass and we said, we're all invisible. And these guys, they came, and they were walking 2 feet from us, walking up and down looking for us. And there was like 8 of them. And they were like going all up and down the fence. They were like mad. They were like, we can't find them. We can't find them. They aren't over here. They aren't over here. I mean, there was a guy standing right there. We were looking at him, and he was going, I can't see him anywhere, and everything. And I'm like, this is pretty good, we're invisible. And we were kind of chuckling because we didn't really believe we were invisible, but we had said that, and then they were like right there and they couldn't find us. And then I said, let's say we're visible and sit up, and so okay, let's do that, and so we're visible now, and then we just sat up and we didn't do anything but just sit up, and there was no one, but they found us immediately. And they said, where have you been? And they yelled at us. Where have you been? I said, we were right here. And they said, no, you weren't. No, you weren't. I said, we haven't moved. We were right here. And they were so mad about that. They wanted to arrest us, but we weren't on their property. We were like in the other property. And I knew that those people weren't home, and they had to say that we were trespassing before they could arrest us for trespassing. I mean, we kind of got into a little bit of it. The sheriff didn't want to get into it because, as I said, it's a military federal problem. They aren't disobeying the law. I'm not going to do anything about that. The military couldn't do anything about it. They were mad about it. They said, well, is that your car over there? It's like, yeah. And they said, there wasn't even a no parking sign. They couldn't get me for parking wrong or anything. And so they said, well, what are you doing, And we said, well, we're hanging out, And they just gave us a hard time. They knew what we were doing. We knew what we were doing, but they couldn't do anything about it. And they were just mad about it. But anyway, so stuff like that spirituality thing, there are different times when I just kind of drew on it and said, I can change reality. And so it was kind of like Lindsay brought magic to me, and that's more the way I would describe it. Not feminist spirituality, but making sense of magic. And that's a big thing. Yeah, it's done me well over the years.
Why would you be monitoring planes? Can you talk about why that would be happening?
The peace camp was set up to address the military, and it was set up kind of as a temporary thing for the transshipment point and of those weapons. And for me, a lot of the camp thing was being drawn to that. I was very drawn to anti-military action. And extremely earnest about it. And like I said, when I was traveling around on my own, I would have loved to have smashed into a fence or taken out a bulldozer or something. And I just didn't feel like I could. The camp gave me that way of doing that I'll use the word safely in a kind of broad term, but there are other people doing that. And so I was focused on, like, my job was making temporary structures permanent, and that was my job at the peace camp. But my job for myself was that addressing the military. That's what I was really there for. And I took that very seriously. So I could do arrest action, get arrested. I did in and out actions a lot and stuff like that. But again, there's this pragmatic part of me that was like, how do I really stop this stuff from going on? And that was like, let me educate myself around what kind of military planes carry what, so I know when they are actually carrying nuclear weapons as opposed to, bunk beds or something. I wanted to know, like, when the helicopters come in, what kind of helicopters? Are they fighting helicopters? Are they transporting things? What are they actually doing over there? And I didn't know how to find that information out other than through government documents, which most of them were classified, and I didn't know how to get to them. But the other thing was I could monitor the air traffic, because they'd fly over the camp a lot, and they had those surveillance helicopters a lot that would just hover over us. And so I kind of wanted to know that piece of information, and so I did go to the library and I studied up on military aircraft, learned, like, what's a cargo plane, what's a fighter plane, and what's this and that. And then I went to the airfield and would sit and monitor what was coming in and out of there, which is illegal. Not allowed to do that. You're allowed to watch it, but you're not allowed to record it. And I was recording it. And I wasn't recording it because I could really do anything about it. I was recording it so I could see what their patterns were like. Oh, every Tuesday they're taking nuclear weapons to this place, and they're doing it to a far place or a near place because of the type of aircraft they were. Like, it's not a helicopter, it's a cargo plane, So I was hoping to kind of suss that stuff out. And that's what my whole idea was. It was my idea. I talked to a few other women about it and said, I'm going to do some airfield vigils, in that I'm just going to write down what's going on there. Tomorrow morning I'm going to be over there the whole day or something or all morning I won't be available. So that's what I was doing, and some women came with me and some women, and I don't know how much other women really thought that was a great idea or not. It wasn't an action-packed idea, it was just kind of monitoring things. And I did almost seriously get in big trouble over there because it is illegal. And it might have been that time that they came out that I described before, but maybe it wasn't. They found me a lot, and not a lot, but enough, so that they tried to discourage me lots of different ways. And I was always careful about where I was sitting. I was always careful about how legal I was. I was always ready to figure out how to get rid of the notebook. I didn't have the same notebook with every single day in the same notebook. I just would get a piece of paper, and then I could ditch the piece of paper or something like that if I had to. But I never really found out that information. I mean, I did say, oh, well, that's a helicopter doing, probably something in state or something, but I didn't, it was more, for me, feeling empowered about doing anti-military groundwork. I came up with knowing more about how they were using the airfield, and rules around the airfield and stuff like that. There was one airfield action I did, which is an in and out action, where we had, I don't know if you knew about little dowels, and we went in and we laid dowels on different parts of the air pads and stuff like that. And see, some of them were runways where they would never have found those dowels because they're at the end of a runway, and then there are other places where, like the helicopter pad, or I knew where they would maybe see the dowels or not see the dowels, and we put the dowels, some of them at the end of the runway, so they wouldn't pick them up, so that they would still be there for a long time, maybe. But yeah, we put little dowels in different places in the airfield, and then we left, and whatever happened.
Little cloth
Dowels that said, like, I died at Hiroshima.
Right.
They're little baby dolls. They weren't store-bought dolls. They were dolls people made, and they all had little messages on them, like "War kills babies," or something like that. And we just put them around in different places.